Steve, it should be an easy victory, and it's an important victory because it's one of the linchpins of the industrial system for raising animals. And if you removed this non-therapeutic use of antibiotics, now they're being used for growth promotion and to prevent animals from getting sick in their filthy, stressed, and brutal conditions. You'd have to change those conditions. And the countries that have really done it have changed those conditions. Denmark is a good example. But it's a hard issue for a couple of reasons. One is...
Although there are still CAFOs in Denmark.
There are, that's right.
They're better CAFOs, but they're CAFOs.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean you're putting animals back on picket-fenced farms. Definitely not. But you're reducing the intensity. You're cleaning them. They're less filthy, and you have to reduce the stress that the animals are experiencing, and then you can deal with it without antibiotics. But it's a tough issue for a couple of reasons. One is explaining it to the public in a very clear-cut way. I mean, the threat is not that you're eating antibiotics as residue, although it turns out that is a threat. I'll get to that in a second. But that wasn't the main point. The main point is by subjecting all these microbes to this everyday onslaught of antimicrobials, they develop resistance, and you have these superbugs coming off of feedlots, especially hog confinement operations.
It's not really that difficult to understand.
You know, in general, people, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're more motivated by, oh, wait, so it's not bad I'm eating this? This is a more abstract threat. This is going to affect someone else at some other time. So I think it is. I mean, I think it's hard to make it a really visceral issue. You know, we also overprescribe antibiotics to our kids for ear infections where they don't really work, and that's also leading to the same problem, and that's also been hard to get on top of, because I want my kid to have antibiotics, even if it's going to make it more difficult for your kid to, you know, fight some infection down the road. So that's one issue. And then the other big issue, and by the way, the inaction of the Obama administration it's kind of flagrant. I mean, there was a court ruling, a federal court ruling in 2012 telling the government, you must deal with, the FDA, you must deal with this problem. And in fact, they specifically said in that decision, and a voluntary program would be a dereliction of your duty. And what do we get? A voluntary program. It was really kind of flagrant. But you're up against not just one powerful industry, animal agriculture, but two, big pharma. They make, 80% of the antibiotics they make go to, to animal feed. And they don't want to give up this, this market. So I think, in an administration that doesn't like to pick too many fights with industry, picking a big one with two was probably more than they had stomach for. But we'll see if it works. I mean, if antibiotic sales don't plummet next year, we've been had. And in fact...
Well, actually, if antibiotic sales don't plummet last year...
Yeah. Well, it started, that's right, the end of 2013. And in fact, what happened in Amsterdam, where they did something similar in the Netherlands, they said that you can no longer label these antibiotics for growth promotion. You can use them for preventive, prophylactic use. All that happened was that they changed the labels, and antibiotic sales were steady, just absolutely untouched. And that's what I fear is going to happen, that we'll just say we're doing it to prevent illness. But why are you doing it to prevent illness? Because you've created a situation where the animals are going to be sick. So, but it still is a great issue to push on, and a very important one. And to the extent you can teach people what's going on, you learn a whole lot about the system. It is it's a systemic issue. So that's why I do think it should be a high priority for the food movement.
You wanted to talk about eating antibiotics.
Oh yeah, thank you for reminding me. So I thought the whole issue was resistance, but there has been some research in recent, in the last year or two, that shows that low levels of antibiotics that remain in the meat that you're eating and get into the food system may be one of the factors causing obesity. And that this certainly stands to reason. I mean, the way we use them in agriculture is we give tiny amounts of antibiotics to animals, and for reasons we don't totally understand, they grow faster. They get fat.
Right.
And it may well be that the way we're treating the animals, we're treating ourselves. So the person you maybe should have talked to in the White House was Michelle Obama, and that maybe antibiotics are part of her obesity issue efforts. There was
as you said, kind of abstract.
Yes, but not if it's a matter that you're eating something that's going to make you fat. It's going to make you look like those cows in the field that are also getting the antibiotics. That, I think, would get people's attention. And if this research continues, is duplicated, there is someone on campus in the public health school who I was on a panel on this subject last week, and he said, in fact, he had, get ready for this, stopped eating organic food because of his concern about antibiotics. And I'm like, why? Well, because organics uses feedlot manure as a very important source of fertility. Sorry, I'm going to complicate your lives now a little bit. And that the antibiotics survive that process. And so the antibiotics are entering the organic food chain, according to this public health expert. Has the produce been tested to see if there are antibiotics in it? Does it survive the composting of the manure? I don't know, but it's a big loophole in organic laws that we're spreading this toxic manure on our clean fields.
Does he drink water? Because there's antibiotic.
There's antibiotic. That's right. There is. No, it's in the water too.
I stopped drinking water too.
And by the way, we're exposing ourselves to antimicrobials all the time. Triclosan is in every cosmetic. It's in all the hand sanitizing products. The skin is a permeable barrier. And that, and the thinking about the mechanism is that it's messing with our microbiome. And it is encouraging the growth of certain kinds of bacteria that more efficiently digest our food and therefore give us more calories from it. So anyway, that's the theory, and I think that that's research that bears watching.
I'm gonna interview you for a second. I don't want to spend the next half hour talking about antibiotics, but I do want to ask you, if we say this issue is important, and we do, and if we say it's winnable, and we think it is, what are we not doing that we should be doing? And when I say we, I mean the so-called food movement. What's wrong?
Well, there's reason to be very impatient about the food movement, but it's also important to understand that it's very new and very young and barely exists. As much as we talk about a food movement, we don't have the numbers that we do on other issues. If you asked Obama, is there a food movement? I'm not sure he would say that there was. And I think that's true for a lot of people in Washington. They haven't felt the heat. I don't think we're well organized enough. I don't think we have those kind of national organizations like you see, say, in the environment with large memberships that can drive votes on a certain bill. I think we have very few friends in Congress so far. So I think we need to recognize that we're in a very very early stage of developing this politics.
So we're relying on the goodwill of the Obamas or whoever happens to be in office. I mean, we do.
Well, I think we've learned that's a mistake.
Right. I mean, if you look at the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act, which I would say, I guess I would say is the most successful thing in the food world that the administration has done. It's our biggest step forward in food in the last few years, I think.
This is, why don't you summarize it briefly?
Healthy, Hunger, Free Kids Act has mandated changes in school lunches that hadn't happened and made school lunches, in fact, although the nutritional standards are questionable, there's many, many things wrong with this. The act has made school lunches better. It's dragged school lunches kicking and screaming into the 20th century anyway, if not the 21st. It's made real changes in the way kids eat, and it's going to make many more changes in the way kids eat, because if you think about how we all eat, we know that it's hard to make changes in the way you eat. So if you insist that food be better, that is, if you remove tater tots, chicken nuggets, burgers, fries, et cetera, to some extent from school lunches, the kids who've been eating those things for 10 years, the 16-year-olds, are going to be upset about that. At least some of them are going to be upset about that, and they're going to reject or make noise about that. And then we'll get into that in a minute, what happens as a result of that. But if you bring a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old into school and you say, okay, it's vegetable soup, it's rice and beans, it's salad, it's an apple, it's whole grains, and so on, and these things actually are mandated by this act. This kind of eating is mandated here. You are teaching kids, young kids, who are obviously the most impressionable, that this is what real food is, that this is what they're going to be eating in school. And there's a million studies that show that this works. It even has an impact on the way people eat at home. It even has an impact on the way their parents feed them, and blah, blah, blah. And needless to say, it's encountering fierce resistance, and could be rolled back, and probably will be rolled back if there's a Republican Congress and a Republican president 2 years from now. But it happened.
Yeah.
It did happen.
Partly because Michelle Obama put her personal prestige on the line and forced her husband to defend it in the last round of budget cuts.
But it got passed in the first place.
Yeah.